for joining me this morning. I hope you had a peaceful and reflective and happy Republic Day yesterday. Some people were badly affected by the rains, Bamboo in particular, Aranguez, Mount Lambert, those areas. In my own, Diego Martin, of course, in my own constituency, Sharp Road in Caparo was affected, Tiwari Circle in Arena Road, off Arena Road was affected, and in Cashew Gardens also some people were affected. But mercifully, the rains were not as bad as we expected. We expected about 2 days of torrential rains, and that did not happen. We had intermittent rains during the course of one day and maybe the night before, and I think that spared a lot of the country, but some areas were affected by this. And of course the human anguish that comes from this, when your house gets dirty, when the slush comes in your house and you have to spend the time cleaning, and it takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, it's very debilitating. And we really have to find a solution for this. I have proposed a solution that the UNC will put in place when the population agrees to put us in government once more. And that is a clear plan that will lead to hopefully permanent and sustainable solution to this problem of flooding and drought and water capture and distribution, etc. But I don't want to talk about that today. I want to talk about the fact that we are a republic and what that might mean for us and what we should be thinking about and what we should be focusing on in terms of where we are headed as a country. My name is Boindra Dat Tiwari. I'm the Member of Parliament for Caroni Central. I'm a member for the opposition UNC. Our leader is Kamla Persad Bissessar, former Prime Minister and now leader of the opposition. And when I talk to you as an MP, as a citizen, as a member of the UNC, and as a parliamentarian who must deal from time to time in national and international issues, because that is what bills that come in Parliament are about. So I am not limited by any framework to speak about things here. I take the responsibility for the things I speak about and for the opinions that I express. We in the UNC have a framework. We have a philosophical perspective. We have a plan for the future. We had a manifesto for 2015. We had a manifesto for 2010. We were guided by a medium-term framework in 2010-2015, from 2011 to 2015. And it is within those frameworks that I speak to you on the matters on which I speak. Now, we celebrated our Republic Day yesterday. It was, given that we had re-established Republican status in 1976, you're talking about what? 76, 86, 96, 2006, 2016, 2016. That's 40 years. And then in addition to that, now you have 3 years leading to 2019. So that's 43 years as a Republican state. And before that, we had independence in 1962. So you add to those 43 years, 14 years, the difference between 1962 and 76. So that's 43 and 4, 47 and 10, 57. So we are almost 60 years old as an independent state. 57, in fact, and 43 years old as a Republican state. And the question that arises is, should that mean something to us? And if it should mean something to us, what does it mean? Now, if you are 57 years old as a human being, you are getting on there in years. Most people, given the current situation with health and with medicine and with the kind of care and the quality of life that people live, will live to about 90 years old. Some may go in their 80s, others may go in their 70s. But if you're 57 years old, you spent most of your life as a human being, and the rest really comes to the mature years of your life. If you are 43 years old as a human being, you just crossed middle age, and what it means is that you are sort of perhaps in the most productive period of your life. And I don't think we should think of ourselves as an aging nation, all right, despite 57 years of independence. I mean, the fact is that 57 years for a nation is very young. And I don't think we should think of ourselves as a nation that, but I do think that we should think of ourselves as a nation that must enter the most productive years of our life now, 43 years after the Republican state that we established in 1976. So the question really for us is, what does that mean? What should we be doing? And what should be happening? Now, you know, we derived our entire parliamentary system, our legal system, our system of government, and our way of conducting politics and government and governance in the country from the British. And when you look at what is happening in Britain, you begin to see with this Brexit issue that we have serious, very serious problems with the constitutional issues that guide the conduct of business in that country from which we derived our whole system, Britain. Okay? So you have a situation in which a referendum was held there over Brexit. And a campaign was conducted which led to an outcome in which the people of Britain said that they want to get out of Brexit. And then you have a situation in which the parliament is hung, so to speak, and people are prepared to carry out the demand of the population in the referendum. Most parliamentarians are, but they do not want to have a situation in which they jeopardize the future of Britain and in which they break away from the rest of Europe in such a way that it is disruptive and antagonistic and inimical to the relations that have been developed over many, many years. And then it has implications for trade, investment, and development as well. So in that situation, the Parliament, as you know, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, advised the Queen, and on that basis, Parliament was suspended. And the court in England has now ruled that that was an illegal act and bad advice on the part of the Prime Minister. So what you have here in Britain is, first of all, a crisis between direct democracy as established by a referendum, representative democracy as is practiced by a parliament of duly elected representatives and nominated members in the upper house, the House of Lords in England. And through the separation of powers, first of all, the exercise of the rights and responsibilities and powers of the Prime Minister in advising the Queen on what to do with regard to Parliament, and she acted on that advice without question. I imagine there was some conversation, but she acted on the advice. And ultimately now, through the separation of power, the determination by the court that that was an illegal act, and then Parliament now has to resume. The Speaker last night on one of the networks, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Parliament in Britain, said that he would simply resume Parliament and continue the work because it has been ruled an illegal act to have suspended in the first place, and that there is no need to recall. They just have to resume and to continue. So in that place, from that place where we have derived our concept of constitutional order, we have now a tremendous disruption and some confusion, and we have the entire system being tested in England, in the United Kingdom. Okay? I have not gotten into other things that have to do with Scotland and Ireland and so on. I am just dealing with the parliamentary system in England. Now, England is a country that was an imperial power in the 15th century. You know, they commanded the seas in the 15th and 16th centuries, as far back as that, and 17th and 18th, of course, up to the 19th century. And they had moved, of course, from king and queen as the source of power to the transfer of democracy through a parliamentary system. I don't want to get into that. But what we have had is a long evolution of that country and most of Europe over a 500-year period from the 15th century to the present time. So when you think of our country, 43 years as a republic, 57 years as a independent country, we are a young country. So that a country that has a long history of centuries can have a crisis. And it is not abnormal for a young country, therefore, I would think, to have crises. And that the history of the United Kingdom and the history of Europe would tell us that there were crises all along the way, including world wars that had countries of Europe fighting against each other at various points in their history, and individual countries caught up in civil war at different times and in different points in history. Another country that is close to us that is seen as a prime seat of democracy in the world is the United States of America. And we have a situation in the United States now in which, with the current president, many of the institutions in the country are being tested. All three aspects of governance and power in the country, the courts in the one hand, the legislature on the other, the Congress and the Senate, and the presidency itself, the White House, center of power in the United States. All of those are being tested. And you have a situation where yesterday the Speaker of the House, which is another contending pole of power in the US system, has called for impeachment proceedings to accelerate in 6 committees that have been established in the legislature over which she presides. That is to say, the Congress, the House of Representatives of the United States. So we have had all kinds of tests taking place right before our eyes, watching it on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and all the other stations, Al Jazeera, etc., every day. And we have been seeing this unfolding before our very eyes, so that the Constitution itself is being tested in the United States, and constitutional democracy is likely to change over what is transpiring and has been transpiring over the last 3 or 4 years. We have a situation in Guyana in which the courts, the Caribbean Court of Justice has ruled in a matter basically saying that elections should be called in that country within a certain time frame. And the president of that country, Mr. Granger, whom I have had the opportunity to meet with the former Prime Minister of this country, Mrs. Kamala, who was her predecessor, has basically not chosen to abide by the ruling of the court. And you have had now international interventions in which other countries have written to that president, because they have a presidential system, urging that the constitutional and the constitutional requirements and the ruling of the court be followed, so that they hold elections there in Guyana. So, in the Caribbean, in the United States, in the UK, we have a situation in which countries old and new, because Guyana would be a new country, they got their independence after us, are having constitutional problems and are having challenges within their jurisdictions. And that is also true of Trinidad and Tobago. We have no crisis in terms of constitutional challenge here at the moment in terms of any specific issue. But the issue of where power shall lie and how it will be balanced and distributed, and what is the role of the people, the institutions of the people, the institutions that are created to generally establish a framework for good governance in Trinidad and Tobago, free of political and partisan interference. The legislature, the House of Representatives, and the Senate, which is an appointed body, and the difference between the executive, which is accountable to the parliament, and the parliament acting on behalf of the people and having some connection with the people they represent through parliamentary representatives. And then the role of the court in making determinations that have to do with how the other institutions should function and what rights people have in a democracy. All of those things have been very active during the period since independence, since we gained Republican status, and especially so in the last 4 years, as boundaries have been stretched, as decisions have been taken arbitrarily, and as the people find themselves in a situation where they cannot hold to account the government that is governing the country, and where the politics has become so partisan that the people are, in a sense, divided, and a large proportion of the population do not know how to proceed as two elections approach: local government elections, first of all, and general elections, possibly in 2020, but either election could be called at any time this year or any other time. So that is our situation in Trinidad and Tobago. And the question does arise, what should our Republican state look like? What kind of country should we be? What are the things that we should be aspiring to? And what kind of society should we create? Now, I think everybody would agree that what we should have is a democracy. And we need more democracy, not less democracy. And what that means, therefore, is that you would need a stronger voice of the people and a stronger influence of the people on the decisions that are made in the society, and a greater accountability by both the executive and parliament to the citizens of this country. Okay? So what we need in democracy is a deeper democracy, not a shallower one. We need the people to have a stronger voice, not a weaker one. We need the people to have more participation, not less. We need the people to have more influence, not less. And we need the government, that is to say the executive part of the government, and we need the parliament, that is to say the elected body and the nominated body, to be more responsive to what the population is thinking and feeling and saying. And in a society that is as complex and as diverse as ours, in which there are many groups, many diverse groups, whether it is ethnicity, all right, in which you have, for instance, two major minorities, Africans, Indians. You have a large mixed population, almost 35% of the population. And you have small minorities, whether they come from the French Creole origins, whether they come from Syrian origins, whether they are Chinese, whether they are Portuguese. You have a society of two main minorities, a growing mixed population, and smaller minorities in the society. And that in itself requires a certain sensitivity in governance. You have a society of many religions in which religion is becoming a very important form of identity in the world. I will not express my views on that. I have my own thoughts on that. But the reality of the situation in which is there is an assertion of identity in relation to religion, whether it is Islam, whether it is Christianity, whether it is Hinduism, whether it is Judaism, whether it is anything else. The point is that these things are a factor, and there are international influences on any local situation in Trinidad and Tobago or elsewhere. You also have a country that is economically diverse. You have a lot of people at the bottom of the scale who are poor. You have a lot of people who are working to make a living who find it very difficult in order to live, the working class people. You have middle class people who are under threat. You have upper middle class people who are not enjoying the quality of life they once did. And you have the wealthy in the society who are doing okay, but who are always living constantly in a situation where they don't know if they are secure here in Trinidad and Tobago or if they must make arrangements elsewhere for the purposes of security. So there are certain uncertainties that attend life in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to say on the economic front, therefore, I have made the case in democracy that we need more democracy, not less. In the economic front, we need more equity, not less. We need greater equity. If you have a society in which you have a small number of wealthy people and a large number of people who are scrunting for a living, you are going to end up with social and political problems in the society. And therefore, it is necessary to have economic policies that address these issues. And I want to say that the economic policies that address these issues must not be to take from the rich and to distribute to the poor or the less well-endowed, because what you then do is to have a situation of greater uncertainty, unfairness, and pauperization of people who have worked to create wealth. What you need to do is to have policies that would create the conditions for the poor to move out of poverty, for the working class to be comfortable, for the middle class to grow and enhance their position, and for those who work hard to be able to enjoy the benefit, the fruits of their labor. And with greater equity and opportunity in the financial and economic system, I think that what you would have then is a society that is much more meritocratic and in which hard work and smart work and sustained endeavor makes the difference in the quality of life that you live. So we need more democracy, and we need economic democracy and opportunity for all. And therefore we need to do that in order to have greater equity and more participation in the political system. Greater democracy for more participation, meaningful participation in the political system, and greater economic democracy to have greater participation in the economic system. We also need in this country independent institutions. All right, one of the reasons why I raised the prospect of Trinidad and Tobago headed in the direction of a failing state in 2005, as far back as 2005, and I see that the matter is coming up again, is because if you do not have strong independent institutions that are free from political interference and partisan influence, then you compromise democracy and you compromise economic democracy. Okay? Not only must we have a separation of powers, executive, parliamentary democracy, and the courts, but we must have strong independent institutions that are free from political interference and partisan influence. Now, there are many things more that we need to strengthen this Republican democracy, and that will bring fairness and equity in the society, and that will create the conditions for sustainability. Last 2 weeks, I spoke about climate change and its effects, so the environmental considerations are very important. And I will again go to that issue at some point in time, but I don't wish to deal with that here. So that takes us directly to the Petrotrin situation here today. And I want to say that from my point of view and from the point of view of the UNC, we are glad that the refinery, which the Rowley government shut down, is going to be reopened again. Because even if it does not employ all the workers that lost their jobs, almost 7,000 of them, at least it will employ some, and it will be active. And therefore, we support that. We support the return of the refinery to functionality and the creation of the employment that will take place, and then the economic effects of that, because we know what happened with the closure and how many people, including fence-line communities, were affected. Okay? But it is important that we understand very transparently and clearly why the Petrotrin refinery is going to be handed over to the OWTU in a company called Patriotic, and what are the terms of that. Okay? We have no problem, I want to say, with the unions having ownership of the plant. We have no problem with the union coming into ownership, but Patriotic will be a company, and the union will be involved in the company, and there may be other players in bringing this Petrotrin refinery to the point where it can be successful as a business. And it is important, for the sake of transparency, that the country knows who are the players involved. It is also important for the government to explain to the country whether this is a political decision, or whether this is an economic decision, or whether it is a mixture of both. I think that the government must be transparent about that. If it is a political decision, I have no problem with that. In other words, if it is a decision that says, look, we are taking a decision to give the union an opportunity to run the refinery because we feel that it is good politics to do so, I have no problem with that. But they must come to the country and say so. And having said so, they must also tell us what is the economic risks and the financial risks that attend that, so that transparently the country will know. If it is an economic decision, that is to say, out of the 77 companies that bid, only 3 made reasonable bids, because that is what the Minister of Finance said in Parliament last Friday. And out of them, we are judging the bid by Patriot to be the best bid. Then they must come and say so, that this is the best economic bid. And this is why we favor it. And this is the possible fallout that we see. And we are cognizant of that. Or these are the possible gains that we see, and we are cognizant of that. And given the economic calculations based on, first of all the proposals that we got, and secondly, the fact that government wants to divest itself of the Petrotrin refinery, we wish to pass it over to the union because that is the best bid. They can do that. And once they are transparent with the population, I think we can live with that. And the third thing is that if it's a mixture of economic and political, that is to say, they are making the decision for economic reasons, but they are also making it for political reasons. And it is a combination of this that have driven them, has driven them to make these decisions. Then they must tell us what are the likely gains and what are the potential challenges ahead for us. Because at the end of the day, we do not want the citizens to be saddled with another failed enterprise. We wish the Patriot and its alliances and arrangements success, and we hope that it will be successful for the reasons that I mentioned. The jobs, they will be able to supply the country with fuel, there will be more economic activity, we will take what has become now a liability that has been shut down and turn it into an asset. For all of those reasons, we are happy to see the refinery go again. But we need to understand up front that the country will not be saddled at some time in the future with another burden. And more than that, we need to be aware of the fact that maybe sometime in the future that Patriot, as a company that is supposed to be owned by the OWTU and the OWTU leadership, does not find itself in a position where it loses control of this asset. And this private sector entity now will be controlled by entities that we are not now able to know about because the facts are not clear. I raise these issues because I think that they are important considerations for the country. The government has to come under scrutiny for this decision, and it must explain itself to the population. The government does not get a bly on this operation because the entity to which it is passing on ownership is an entity owned by the OWTU. The OWTU has to come under scrutiny in this matter because it is taking ownership of a national asset which the OWTU itself has identified as a national asset. And we want to know who it is involved with besides the union and what is the business plan going forward for success. And I don't think that the OWTU, which has demanded transparency from everybody else in the country, should be averse to transparency. And I was very, very overjoyed yesterday to see the OWTU leadership commit itself to transparency and to say that it will share with the population all the information that is required, and we look forward to that. And finally, I think the citizens have a self-interest in knowing all the facts about this operation so that it can brace itself for whatever happens in the future, good or bad. As I said, we wish the OWTU well. We wish success for Petrotrin, the refinery, and we hope that everything works out. But lay the facts on the table so that we as citizens can make a judgment. This is something that we need to scrutinize carefully and be assured that we will have at least some prospect of success and little prospect of the burden falling to the taxpayer once more at some point in the future, or a runaway horse taking over the refinery over which we have no control. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that you will ask some questions and engage me on the issues that I have raised today.
So good morning, Dr. Tiwari. One of the questions that our viewers have this morning are there any measures or policies that have been implemented by older and more developed nations which are applicable for Trinidad and Tobago to adopt to aid in our economic and societal issues?
Yeah, there are many things that we can learn from other people. I think the Scandinavian countries give us a good example of how you can be involved in global capitalism, that is to say, to build industries that compete in the world, how you can encourage entrepreneurship and business creation in your own country and help small companies to grow into global companies, how you can create a social system that looks after people when they are down, for instance, if they are not working, if they are sick, if they find themselves in economic difficulty, etc., so that they are not deprived basic things such as good health care, food on the table, and so on. And where they place a lot of emphasis on health, social welfare, education and educational achievement, research, science and technology, and basically creating a society of greater equity, more harmony and peace. And I believe that those societies offer us a lot of opportunity to find things that we might be able to do in a society such as Trinidad and Tobago. But we can also learn from other countries. We can learn nearby from a country like Costa Rica, which has done very well in terms of sustainable development and in managing environmental and ecological issues, and which also took a decision many years ago to bring Intel into the country and move the country into an IT-driven kind of economy, and that was then buttressed by educational interventions. I think that we can also learn from other countries, which is to say those countries that have taken small businesses and family businesses and turned them into big businesses, as little European country, for instance, such as Switzerland. So we can learn from a lot of people. We can learn from countries like Malaysia. We can learn some things from Singapore. We can learn even from Barbados, how they are able to create the conditions for national consensus between business, government, labor, and how they can work with a national plan that everybody buy into and support. So there are many countries and societies that we can learn from, and there are many things that we can do here. But I think that in our country, in terms of the economic things that we need to do, we need to make our manufacturing services sector extremely competitive and export oriented. We need to make our conglomerates very competitive in the world, creating the conditions where they can actually contribute to the foreign exchange depletion problem and scarcity problem in Trinidad and Tobago. We need to make our small businesses grow and be competitive and export oriented. And we need to create what you might call land owning, home owning, and shareholding democracy, so that every citizen in Trinidad and Tobago has a stake in their own future and the future of the country, and in the future of Trinidad and Tobago as a sustainable nation.
Dr. Tiwari, one of the other questions that we had this morning are what are your thoughts on the social safety nets currently existing in the framework of Trinidad and Tobago, and how can we reorient these in that people can become self-sustaining after time will and they will after a time not be reliant on those social safety nets?
The first thing that we have to do is to psychologically come to terms with the fact that the purpose of social welfare and social support is not to keep people into dependency and poverty. Once we acknowledge that and we explain that to people, social support of this kind will then become a bridge for people who are not in a position to help themselves help themselves fully and need help to get by, a bridge for them to move into self-sufficiency and self-sustainability. And that means giving people skills. It means designing systems that allow people to earn and to be self-sufficient. And it means getting people from a state of dependency into one of relative independence and self-sustainability. So that the social welfare net must always be there for people who find themselves in difficulty and need help. But they must not be there for people for a lifetime. It must be a temporary transition mechanism to allow people to lift themselves out of poverty and into self-sustainability. And that is how the social safety net needs to be reoriented. The social safety net must not create a permanent poor and a permanent state of poverty for large numbers of people and a permanent state of dependency.
Dr. Tiwari, whilst there are many things that challenge our economy, if there was one thing you can do differently right now that would have the largest impact on economic growth, what will it be?
On economic growth, I think that the first thing that we would have to do is to understand that given more heavy dependence on energy, we need to settle the energy sector in terms of sustainability. And that means taking all the negotiations that need to be completed in the energy sector, the fiscal measures that will allow the big companies to drill, the transfer pricing issues that have to do with how much we get for the gas and LNG that we export, the value chain issues in the energy sector and how we benefit from it including increasing local industries related to the international oil and gas sector. I think we need to settle, and that includes upstream, that include commitments to Atlantic LNG and as well as downstream natural gas sectors. If we can settle all of those things and bring some stability to it, I think that would be helpful. And the second most important thing that we need to do is to create jobs. And I would say that even while we are doing these negotiations, if the UNC were to come into power, the first thing that we would do is to begin to address this problem of flood and drought and lack of water and lack of irrigation and the mismanagement of the capture of water and the environmental things that need to be taken into account to prevent the flooding, to prevent the flood, to get agricultural production going, and to create thousands of jobs at the same time in the country. And I have outlined what that plan is. We would have to dredge every river in Trinidad and Tobago simultaneously. We would have to clean all the smaller streams and tributaries and distributaries. We would have to have a massive drain cleaning program and construction of drainage as may be required. We would have to have a water capture system before that to deal with the question of rain and drought. We would have to have retention ponds. We would have to build communities. We would have to basically set up, after all of that is done, a maintenance system. And between settling the energy sector for our immediate needs and for our future flows of income from that sector and getting the jobs going, we then need to reorient manufacturing and services toward exports and get that sector going, because every shift that we increase in the manufacturing sector really creates a number of jobs more in the society. So the focus must be to stabilize and energize the energy sector for the next 20 years or so, to solve the problem of water capture, flooding, drought, water retention, etc., and to support the agricultural sector so that we deal with the question of food production, exports and imports, and thirdly, to get the manufacturing sector and the services sector going in the direction of exports in Trinidad and Tobago. So you asked me for one thing, but I think as a strategy, we can look at that as one immediate strategy for solving the challenging problems that we have now, and proceed with that as a three-pronged strategy for getting the recovery and growth back to Trinidad and Tobago and its economy.
Dr. Tiwari, one of the questions that our viewers have this morning is, what are your thoughts and expectations for the 2020 budget presentation carded for October 7th? Well,
we are waiting to see, but the first thing I would like to do is to have the Minister of Finance account truthfully to the population, to tell us exactly what our revenue situation is, to tell us exactly what our expenditure situation was for the fiscal year, to tell us exactly what the deficit is, and to tell us what is the level of expenditure he is going to take us to in 2019-20, and what is the pattern of expenditure that this will support. So the first thing is accounting, and the second thing is clarity of perspective going forward in the new budget. The third thing that we would expect from him is to give us a realistic assessment of the debt and indebtedness situation of Trinidad and Tobago, and what that does for us in terms of repayment strategy. What is their debt plan? What is their repayment strategy for the country? And basically, I think that it would be important for the Minister of Finance to tell us what is the fiscal space, what is the debt headroom that we have, and what is the fiscal space that we have as we go into an election year. And finally, I think that he should indicate to us what are the initiatives that they are going to take for economic recovery and growth. Because we have been in a recession from 2016 to the present time. We have been in stagnation. The economy outside of energy has contracted since that time, and no diversification has taken place, and he needs to tell us what he is going to do to cause the economy to recover and to create jobs and to create the conditions for growth in the country. Those are the things that I expect from the finance minister.
Dr. Tiwari, how will the Saudi Arabia oil sighter tax influence the economy of Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, you know, I asked an economist friend what would happen to the price of oil when on the same night that I learned of the drone attack on the Saudi Arabian reserve plants. And that economist sent back to me to say we can expect a 15 to 25% increase in the price of oil. He cautioned me to say that he did not know all of the facts, and he was just going on the fact that there will be a reduction of available oil supplies, but that he felt that the matter would settle down a little bit. Now, normally oil prices, the increase in oil prices would help us here in Trinidad and Tobago, but our production is so low now, under 50,000 barrels a day, that it wouldn't help us much in Trinidad and Tobago. So the rise in oil price has to be accompanied by volume of production for it to make a difference in Trinidad and Tobago in a positive way. But in a situation in which we have a heritage company buying fuels from outside and distributing fuels that they buy from outside, that could in fact, if the price of oil goes up, that could affect the price of fuels to us. And it is possible as well that it could affect the price at the gas pump. We wait to see. There has been no dramatic rise. There has been a rise, but no dramatic rise in the price of oil. So we wait to see what will happen. And we don't know what this oil refinery decision will mean in terms of when the refinery is put back in operational play. We don't know if that is in a few months, in a year, in a couple of years, or what. And we wait to see what will happen there. But we are more than ever in a situation of grave uncertainty with the decisions and indecisions of this particular Rowley government.
Dr. Tiwari, Trinidad and Tobago is a very strong traditional value and practices. Some of their opinion where the retention of too much traditional and cultural values and even principles can hamper and obstruct the opportunities for growth, development, and modernization in our present world. How do we approach this as a nation?
The only way we can do that is by public education, which means bringing the facts to people, engagement of the population, which means consultation and greater democratic participation, and thirdly, allowing all views to contend in a democracy, even the most extreme ones, and at the end of the day, building consensus or going for decisions that the population or the majority of the population feel as desirable. More than that, it takes leadership. All right, leadership is not agreeing with what the largest number of people say if they are wrong. It is by providing light and learning and clarity to people so that no matter where they start or where they are coming from, they are able, with reason and with perhaps a little less emotional attachment, to see the value of what you're saying. And at the end of the day, you always have to explain to people What are the positive and negative impacts? What is the implication of this for them? And how this rests within a frame of values that collectively we can accommodate. And the problem here is that you do not have that kind of leadership. The problem is that the government and Keith Rowley as Prime Minister wants to chastise the population, wants to bulldoze the population, wants to quarrel with the population, wants to be contemptuous to the population. And they will not bring clarity to anything. And they lie all the time, and they present misinformation to the population, which creates greater confusion rather than clarity. So, I mean, what we need is light and learning. And we need, we need some creative interventions that are based on fact and that are based on the opportunities that are presented in the world, so that people can embrace a forward movement in the society. I think I think science and technology is something that will carry this country forward. I think education is good for everybody. I think a decent, functional, affordable health system is valuable to everybody. I think that a land-owning, home-owning democracy in which people own equity, shares in companies that are local and international that operate in Trinidad and Tobago is something that is very valuable. I mean, and those are progressive ideas that we can actually embrace. All right? I think the OWTU having a share in the ownership of the refinery is a good thing, but the question is, will it turn out to be a good thing and be profitable, or will the government set up the OWTU to fail, and then we end up with another problem in the society? So the problem is not the OWTU, the problem is not Patriot and their aspirations. Those are legitimate aspirations. The problem is the government.
Dr. Tiwari, this will be the last question given our time frame. So can you state if there is a guarantee to constitutional reform should the UNC win the next general election to ensure good governance and to ensure politicians are answerable to the people and not to continue to the function of their own merit?
I am for constitutional reform. We tried to do constitutional reform during the time that we were in power, 2010 to 2015. And I must admit that we did not handle that well. We did not handle it effectively. It turned out to be very controversial and unnecessarily so. And that does not mean, though, that we should not address it again. What we need is greater democracy, more democratic participation. What we need is greater economic democracy in the country, and greater equity in the society. What we need are stronger, more independent institutions, and what we need are higher levels of accountability by those who govern within a framework of good governance, participatory democracy, and economic participation. And there are ways of doing that. We are a small island, we are a small country, and we also need to consider as well those issues that have come to the forefront now because of climate change issues, because we are an island, and we have to address the issue of sustainable development and indeed the sustainability of our country as 7 islands, because we have 5 off the coast of Chaguaramas in addition to Tobago and Trinidad. We need to address the issue of the sustainability of these islands as part of an island state. Okay, that's it. Any more questions?
No questions.
All right, I want to thank you for listening to me. You've been very kind to join me here this morning. I hope that the fact that I talked about all of these issues having to do with constitutionality and republicanism and democracy and so on does not seem to you as if they are divorced from the day-to-day problems that we are dealing with in Trinidad and Tobago, because believe you me, they are not. People believe that there are some people who believe that you have to deal with everything nitty-gritty, that you have to deal with the problems and the issues that people are facing every day. The fact that they cannot put food on the table, the fact that they cannot get books for their children, the fact that when the rains come, they lose their roof and their houses fall down, that they are flooded out. Yes, you have to deal with that. But you have to deal with why that is a reality too. And why that is a reality has to do with the system of governance we have, the constitutional apparatus we have, the notion of democracy that we are practicing, the system of economic democracy and participation that we have, and the way we address the issue of governance and economic equity in the society. So the big questions affect the small problems, and the people problems are directly related to the philosophical perspective that you have for the society. I am not here to fool you. God has blessed me and through the people of Trinidad and Tobago with the opportunity to get a decent education and to spend a lot of my time looking at issues, reading books, doing research, looking at the research of other people to try to understand how you identify, first of all, what the problem is and how you find solutions to the problems we have. All the problems that we have are solvable, and we have enough of an asset base, including a human capital and intellectual capital base, to be able to solve all of these problems. And don't let anybody fool you. You cannot solve the little problems and leave the big problems quiet, because they will come back to bite you like a bad dog. You have to take a holistic approach to the solutions of problems in Trinidad and Tobago, and you have to take a methodical approach by looking at the society and the structure of the economy, the structure of the politics, and the structure of the economic condition of our people and the numbers that are involved in that, in order to find sustainable solutions to the society and the society's problems. Okay? We must believe in Trinidad and Tobago, and we must believe that we are the people to solve our own problems. Nobody is going to come from England or Canada or the US or Finland or some other place to solve our problems. We have to solve our problems. We cannot get Superman or Batman to come and solve our problems. And God will not solve our problems because he says that we have to help ourselves. God helps him who help ourselves. We have to help ourselves. We pray to God and we try to get the best solutions, and we do them. And we must do them together. My sisters and brothers, this is the challenge for us in this era, and we must do it. Nobody else will do it. And we've got to find a way of solving the problems of Trinidad and Tobago. And I have no doubt that we can do it. Thank you very much.